After a while, once you have some idea of an illustration in mind, you can ask yourself what this illustration accomplishes or will accomplish. Is it a joke? Is it a statement? Is it an opinion? I think one of the best things you can do with illustration is ask a question rather than propose an opinion or make a statement, because this invites the reader or the viewer to participate in it. And so you don't just agree or disagree, or you realize, well, I've seen that now. You kind of walk away thinking about that piece, and you continue having a conversation with the piece. Of course, when I have to do a quick editorial thing about a specific subject, it would be inappropriate to think about my conceptual ideas and propose grand questions. So a lot of times it is good to just find out the best way to communicate clearly. But in my personal work, maybe because of that, I go the exact opposite route and I try to be as confusing as possible. One way of approaching illustration is by thinking of it as a series of very carefully placed dots with no lines between them. And you allow the reader either to see it as it is, as just a bunch of dots, or to make connections between them however she likes. So a couple of words about inspiration. Raymond Queneau, the French poet and novelist, wrote in one of his journals, "The poet is never inspired because he is the master of that which appears to others as inspiration." Later on he formed Oulipo, which is a French workshop, translated as the Workshop for Potential Literature, where authors would come up with really convoluted and strange constraints to come up with startlingly original works. So Georges Perec has a novel without the letter E. Queneau himself has a book in which one mundane incident is retold about 100 times, each time in a different style. And that book particularly is called Exercises in Style. I think there's a lot we can learn from that approach as illustrators. The way you draw your thumbnail sketches is entirely up to you. They don't have to be clear, they can be if you want. But I would advise you not to go into too much detail, because you don't want to do the same thing twice. You don't want to waste your time on this. And you don't want to feel precious about them. So if you make a really nice drawing, it'll be harder to kill it. So once you've exhausted all your ideas, it's time to invite our inner critic back. And this is the time to be critical. You can look at all these ideas that you come up with and throw away some of them, maybe remix them, do whatever feels right. Also remember that our minds can naturally gravitate towards elegant solutions because we like a narrative in our lives. We never have a narrative, but we want to. I think this is one of the reasons why a lot of experimental art or experimental literature in particular is labeled as challenging or difficult, because it doesn't offer a sense of narrative, an arc from beginning, middle to end. Again, I recommend you to take a break at this point. It's good to come back and let some distance happen. I think idleness is really important to the artistic process. It's just as important to let yourself do nothing for stretches of time, because you are not doing nothing. You're actually constantly thinking about it in the back of your mind, and then when suddenly in the shower an idea pops into your head, out of nowhere. It's not out of nowhere, it's out of these idle hours that you spend walking around, drinking tea or staring at a wall. So once you have a good idea, you should look at it as a whole and also examine every element. So look at each separate element. Let's say you have a hammock, a hammer, and a ferret. You should ask yourself what each one of them accomplishes. If the answer to this question is not much or nothing, you should consider editing it out, or maybe merging it with something, maybe putting it in the background, or maybe leaving it there, but you should question this. So in editorial assignments for literature, for instance, there's a very common aversion to depicting characters. If you look at New York Times book review, they will almost never see someone's face drawn in full detail. Well, why is that? Well, there's a number of reasons. I think most importantly, you don't want to tell people what someone looks like when they can imagine their characters. You can see that also on book covers. So the same principle applies to what you're doing. Is it a specific character that you have? If you have a character, how specific should it be? Does each element contribute something? Ask yourself these questions. So everything is constrained. Any commercial assignment is always constrained in one way or another. You always have a format that you have to stick with. Sometimes it's flexible, but most of the time it isn't. So it's good to learn to love this constraint and to get something out of it. For instance, a spot illustration is a good way to focus on one little aspect, a character or a detail, while a landscape illustration can allow you, well, a landscape. Or a portrait is good for anything that's vertically centered. Whatever you have, it's good to analyze what the format gives you and try to use it to your advantage. For a lot of artists, the sketches are always better than the final. It's a very common problem that students complain to me about all the time. And unfortunately, there is no solution to it. But I have a few hints and tips that might help you. So first of all, you might want to keep your sketches very loose. What happens when you do this is you're not tempted to trace, but when you do your final, it'll be more like you're still drawing, you're still coming up and improvising. You can also use the sketches as your final. In other words, you can just go straight to final from the sketch somewhere in a corner of a room or on your desk or in a different room. Doesn't matter. In the back of your head, maybe. Of course, this is very stressful because it feels like you don't know what goes where, but it allows for a lot of improvisation and it is a lot of fun. Most importantly, nowadays with Photoshop, if you use that approach, you can mix things together. So if you have 2 or 3 attempts, you can take, let's say, a head from one of them and torso from the other and remove the legs altogether. Finally, you can mix this approach, so you can have certain details sketched out well. And this is something that I personally do. So for most of my sketches, I keep everything very loose, but then if there's a face that I need to get right, particularly if it's a portrait, I would make sure that the nose and everything is more or less in the same proportions that it should be. So then I can relax in some areas and I can be more precise in others. When you're working on an actual assignment, the sketches that you present to an art director should be very clean, very easily readable, unlike your thumbnails, and they should give a decent idea of what the final illustration is going to be. They shouldn't look like the illustration. You should remember that the art director hires you because she's more or less confident in your abilities. She knows that you can make a beautiful piece of work, and you can dazzle her with all that stuff in the final. Right now, the main thing is clarity. This is optional, but I would advise to number your sketches and very tidily put little borders around them when you present them. This allows the art director to understand the format and where everything goes. And also, under each sketch, you can write very brief descriptions. So if you have a drawing that's a little loose, you can write an albatross flying into a wind tunnel, and then we will know what that is. You can also highlight your more conceptual, metaphorical ideas there. The main difference between the thumbnail sketches you do for yourself and the proper sketches you present to the art director is clarity. You should remember that they usually are juggling 10 other assignments and they don't really have a lot of time to decipher your stuff, so you should try to be as clear and concise as possible, both in your emails and in the actual drawings.
After you select whatever idiom you ended up with, time to start sketching. In this case, I had 3 that I picked, which were share and share alike, keep your head above water, and you are what you eat. I started sketching towards share and share alike, and I liked kind of what was going on. It seemed kind of one-dimensional. It was only about the idea of me thinking, oh, this has something to do with social media because of the like aspect of it. I was not as intrigued about making it. If you don't really like what you're doing, pick something that would be fun. I kind of avoided that one. Then I went to kind of keep your head above water. You can kind of see the ideas I had there. A boat shaped out of a man's head with like him blowing air to keep the boat sailing, which is kind of weird. I really like this idea, you are what you eat. So where do you start there? Let's just start from the beginning. A blank sketchbook page. You are what you eat. The first thing I would do would just to make a word list. What comes to mind? Okay, so first off, obviously food. Maybe junk food. Junk food is really fun to draw, I've found. What's the opposite of junk food? Health. Healthy body. A healthy mind? Mind, body, spirit? So we're already at a spiritual level from you are what you eat. That's weird. I don't know how we ended up there. What's the opposite of healthy mind, body, and spirit working together? Unhealthy. What does unhealthy make me think of? Fat. You know, fat could lead to thinking about waste. For some reason, I think of Texas when I think of a belt buckle. I don't know where this list is going. A guy with sausage fingers. I don't know. They have mustard on them. I have no idea. Maybe it's not food. Maybe that's a better way to look at it. Maybe it could be the things we eat in different ways, the things we consume. We listen to music, that's something we consume. Is it the media we read? You know, the websites we visit? Okay, that's kind of a word list. When you're writing a word list, there's no bad ideas. And I know this list is very all over the place. It opens you up to a lot of different ways of looking at something. If I want to look at some visuals, I'll look at old books. There's like a figure doing everything that we ever do. These universal icons, I always look at them as a really great way to start thinking or start brainstorming. So we're talking about food, and look at all these little fun little icons about food. Drawing eggs and different things, and that cabbage is really sweet. So there's a bread. I think I had something about like being gluten-free, and I think that's really funny how a loaf of bread looks. Something funny about a can. Maybe if a can had belt around it or something. It was kind of bulging out. It could also be like, you are what you eat. You could also just go down the route of like making funny characters that look like food. So I saw a picture of a beet. Maybe it's like a beet guy with like some glasses on. So a lot of times I'll do a lot of these things in pencil and then just ink over them in pen, just so I get like kind of like a round of revisions in there. I really like the idea of that I was kind of talking about, like the it not being about what you eat, but more about the things we consume of, like, you know, media versus like sports and TV and all these things we watch and look. So maybe it's just like kind of making a simple collection of like you are what maybe this is a book. Maybe this is like a soda. Maybe that's a record or something. What would that be? This is some kind of sandwich or something. I don't know. I feel like this idea is pretty good. Typically, even if I kind of found the idea I wanted, I would just fill this page up and see what else I could find. I feel like that's how I've always approached design and illustration, is always just like trying to push myself to come up with a better idea or like a sillier idea or just something different. There's something about spending time in a sketchbook away from the computer. Clears your mind in a way. It's like a way to detach. It's a way to just focus on the ideas and not focus on how you're going to render something or create something in the end. I think they lead to something else. I think when I look at one thing to another thing, maybe I'll combine those things visually in a new way. And I don't think that necessarily can always happen on a computer. I like to sketch. I do it a lot. I'm very comfortable. I feel at home doing it. The one thing that you can kind of do to loosen the gears and get into the mode of sketching is just to simply, take 2 to 5 minutes and just like draw as many animals as you can. You can jump from the word list to sketching when you have an idea. Sketch that. I think you can go back and forth. I think you can sketch a little, keep a word list. In the end, you're just trying to get an idea.
So this first exercise, we're going to be working on something that inspires us. And this can be unique to you. You don't have to worry about it being uplifting or inspirational to anyone else. I'm going to be working on a phrase. I think this is the perfect excuse to use hand lettering. So I'm going to be using maybe 3 different colors only for this project. I changed my mind. I'm going to use 4. And I picked a light color because that's what I'm going to lay down as the background. I'm going to be drawing on top of the letters with black. And then I have some florals in mind, which I'm going to use these darker colors for. Don't get too caught up with your colors. I think just pick a few that you're more drawn to, and that's that. I don't spend too much time thinking about what I'm going to be using other than what colors I'm drawn to in the moment. So the phrase that I chose today is undatable. And this is an example of something that might not inspire or uplift others, but it's something that's always on my mind. I don't think it's a bad thing to be undateable. I think you can be undateable for many different reasons. It might be emotional unavailability, or it might be that you're too aware of your self-worth. I'm starting off with the base color for the letters. Then the second step will be me drawing over the letters. I kind of embellish them a little bit so it's beyond just having the base color. And then that's when I will be drawing. I'm going to draw some floral around the lettering. I'm really just trying to take advantage of the size of the paper. Truly don't get caught up in how this is looking when you're working on your own. It's different for me because I'm your teacher. It's really just about getting it all down. So this is where I am adding some embellishments, some intrigue, you might say, to the letters. I want to add some interest to this because even if people can't relate, it can still be a beautiful piece of art. But it's not something to get caught up in. I think just, especially if you don't identify as an artist, just worrying about getting the feelings down. This exercise is, we're not digging as deep as perhaps the one where we'll talk about what we hate or what we love, but this is still very telling about you and your interests. It's also kind of fun to make something look so beautiful that people might not associate as being fun or uplifting or beautiful, typically. And that's what you get when you draw your feelings. I think that there is beauty in vulnerability, and I do not think that your feelings have to be pretty to be beautiful. I'm going to outline these letters because they just weren't fun enough for me. I'm mostly outlining the letters because I don't want them to get too lost once I incorporate other features into the drawing. It's important to me that the word itself is legible. This is probably the most important part of the piece. Okay, so now that we have our word or phrase, we can go wild with color. This isn't totally necessary. I mean, you might not want to embellish the way that I am, but it can be fun. By the way, I don't know if I mentioned, but these markers are the best, these Tombos. Guys, I didn't plan this at all, when I started, aside from knowing the phrase that I was going to illustrate. So you really should just dive in, see where it takes you. There are things that will drive you mad because we're not working digitally. You can't just like go back and erase marker, but I think that's the fun of it. I think you'll know when you're done just by looking at your drawing, and if you are at a loss for anything to add, just don't push it further. If you're happy with what you made, or you feel like this exercise served its purpose, don't push it too much further. I am almost done. You don't want anything to be too overworked. I didn't use the red because I just didn't feel like the work needed it. Sometimes I start out that way and think, oh, wow, 4 colors, that doesn't seem so bad. And then you just start finding your way in the illustration, and I think less is more. At least that's my mentality for my own work. And there you have it. All right, guys, it's time for you to get started on your own piece, and don't forget to upload to the project gallery. Next up, we'll be working on what we hate.
Okay, so for this collection drawing, we are going to go through one start to finish. This is one where you could possibly do it in an hour if you wanted to, where we actually going to be doing the coloring on the computer. The initial drawing is all of the objects are going to be on one sheet, and it's just going to be black outline, and then we'll scan, and then we'll add the color. And this one's going to be focused on a small collection, okay? So it's kind of makes sense that the paper that I'm using is 7 by 7, because what I'm going to be drawing it's a handful of my buttons and badges and brooches and pins and all of that stuff that it's a collection. It's a mega collection. I wear these guys all the time because, again, all of these pins kind of tell a different story. And again, so I'm just kind of like arranging the possible composition that I might draw here. And so this composition is actually kind of the size of the paper too. So I'm kind of almost doing like a 1-to-1 drawing here too. And let's go. So this first pin that I'm doing is, I had a friend in grad school. His name was Richard Schwartz, who was wonderful. He was this amazing ceramicist. And he also happened to work at TGI Fridays, where you had to have like lots of flair. And at the time I was doing work with, just like I was making buttons. I got my first button maker, and he saw that I was doing stuff with buttons, and he came to my studio and had this big box with him and said, Kate, I have something for you that I want you to have. I want you to have all of my flair. And I was just like, oh my God, I get all of your flair. And it was just like, it was his suspenders, and there was buttons all over the place. And I seriously don't know what happened to the suspenders and all the other buttons. And the only button that I have remaining from the incredible gift of all of Richard Schwartz's flair is this truly amazing Elvis Costello button, which I love. And now I'm gonna draw Elvis Costello. So, yeah, what a great gift. And I've kind of picked this to be the focal point of the drawing just because, well, it's a face. And so to have that be the center image just kind of makes a little bit of sense. Again, like we were talking in the other, with the other print, like perfection isn't what we're going after here. It's just figuring out the best way to tell the story, exploring marks and lines, and just kind of having fun with it. Okay, so Elvis is basically done. Elvis has left the building. Okay, that was really stupid. The next one I'm going to do is this really simple pin that I've had for years and years. It actually glows in the dark, and it just has a hand that says "okay" on it. And I was teaching a workshop in Savannah, Georgia, and a printmaking student made this, and she gave it to me after the workshop, and I had such a fun experience there, and I love this pin, and the student was really rad, and I don't know, it reminds me of like good teaching experiences, and then also I just really like the sentiment behind it too, where it's just kind of like, okay. So we've got okay. So that was easy, done, quick. Like again, like the first round that we did, you can take a little bit longer, you can kind of do more bite-sized drawings. And then this process for drawing collections, it can also be a quicker one sit-down experience too. This pin says hot dogger on it, and my friend Nicole gave it to me, and she had picked it up at a thrift store, and I just love it. Number one, it's a hot dog. Who doesn't like hot dogs? The next one that I'm doing is this Stay Posy pin, which my friend Alex gave me, and it's a good sentiment that I try to adhere to, but a lot of times I'm not successful. But it's a good reminder to stay positive, stay posy. And then I have a thing for pretzels. I've kind of always loved pretzels. I kind of think soft pretzels or hard pretzels are the perfect food. Pretzel time. So this was a button from one of my favorite shops here in Portland called Reading Frenzy. And I picked this up, I think right when I first moved to Portland. And so this button was just kind of a little bit of a memento of, I just like the excitement that I felt when I first moved to Portland several years ago. Plus I like the sentiment on it where it just says, shut up and read. Okay. And then this is a shrinky dink, actually, that was made by one of my colleagues, Tia Factor at Portland State University. And she just gave it to me out of the blue one day, which I thought was really, really sweet. Okay, so I've almost got all of the objects drawn. And now this is where I decide if I want to add any additional commentary to it. And I probably will, just a little bit. So I'm just going to write a couple words. Again, you don't have to do this, but this is just what I'm going to do. And it could be stuff that's obvious to the viewer, or it could be just like internal dialogue that you want to put down on the paper too. Okay, so I think I'm going to be done with this at this point, and now I'm going to be scanning this in and coloring it on the computer.